Hey, okay, so we read last week 20 part of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I thought we were going to get through the whole thing, but we only got through hmm, well, a little bit less than half. That's better than I thought, actually. So I wanted to get to that point today and let you catch up. So this is the title page. It's got the title of the book. It's got I think this is the publisher for it, Beginner Reader Classics. And then it's got two authors because Jules Verne was actually the original author, but Max James wrote this version. So this one is retold for kids. And then here we've got the date that it was printed, and it's got this little warning that this can't be copied or reproduced for anybody. And then we've got the table of contents. So it shows the chapter number, the chapter, and then what page it will start on. So if I remembered, oh, we read to whatever chapter, then I could go to that page. All right, part one. Chapter one, A Runaway Reef. 1866 was a strange year for scientists, even for sturdy captains of sturdy ships and government officers all over the world. Something so big happened at sea that it raised everyone's eyebrow. What could have happened? In July, ships had left to the dark blue sea like any other day, but they came across an enormous thing in the water. They didn't know what to call it, so they put it in quotes, an enormous thing. It looked like a long spindle or a very wide rod. Sometimes it gave off a bright light. It glowed, and sometimes it disappeared. It was also bigger and faster than any whale, even a blue whale, and it moved like a steam train. Captain Baker believed the thing was a runaway reef, a small piece of land that moved in the water. He was about to draw it on a map and give it a name when two water streams shot out of the reef 150 feet into the air. If it was not a reef, then the only other explanation could be that it was a new animal. It was a weird, large creature that hid deep underwater, and it gave everyone trouble when they were at sea. The creature had a sharp instrument on the front of its head. It used the instrument to cut through other ships at sea and sink them. Because every ship was in danger, no one wanted to travel across the sea. Instead, everyone wanted to get rid of it. And back then in 1866, there were no planes. So traveling across the ocean was the only way they could get from continent to continent. Chapter 2, The Good and Bad. I was here in New York to explore. All right, so we're using the word I. This is being told from somebody's perspective. So this is called first person. And we're going to find out who it is who is telling the story in just a couple of minutes here. I am an assistant professor and scientist at the Paris Museum, and I arrived from France not too long ago. Although New York welcomed me, I could not stop thinking about the new creature. Every newspaper had written about it. It was like a puzzle, and no one could put the pieces together. What was this enormous thing? I wondered. Every scientist had said that it was only a large sea animal and that it was undiscovered. No one had ever seen anything like it. I think that it was a large narwhal. A narwhal is a type of whale that has a very long and thin horn on its nose, like a unicorn. So I decided to write about it. Also, that is not accurate. I have heard actually that a narwhal's um, pointy guy is actually a tooth that grows through his upper lip. I don't know. Fact check me on that. The American government had read what I wrote about the mystery of the giant narwhal. They were preparing a battleship to hunt and chase it down. The name of the ship was the Abraham Lincoln, and its commander was Commander Farragut. They sent a letter to me 3 hours before the Abraham Lincoln was to depart for the sea. The letter read, to Mr. Pierre Aronnax, professor of the Paris Museum, Fifth Avenue Hotel, New York, New York. So this is who is telling this story, Mr. Pierre Aronnax. He is a professor, and this is how they would address things back then. The postal carrier would know where Fifth Avenue Hotel was and where New York, New York was. So they didn't use a zip code. They didn't have the street that it was on. I mean, it was Fifth Avenue, but it didn't say like 65 Fifth Avenue. But anyway, that's how they addressed things back then. If you would like to board the Abraham Lincoln, the American government would accept you as the ambassador of France, so somebody who's representing France. Commander Farragut has a cabin for you. We hope that you accept our offer, and we will be setting a course for the Northern Pacific Ocean. Sincerely, J.B. Hobson of the Navy. Chapter 3, As Master Wishes. I wanted to help the world solve the puzzling mystery of the narwhal. I accepted the offer to help the Americans look for it. After all, the only way ships would be safe at sea is if the Abraham Lincoln chased down this troubling monster and rid the world of it. Besides, I thought, I can bring back the narwhal's large ivory tusk for the Paris Museum. Conseil! I yelled. Conseil! I yelled again. Conseil was a very thin and small boy who went on every journey with me. He was also my loyal servant. His name means counsel. Conseil! I yelled a third time. Conseil entered the room. Did master yell for me? Yes, my boy. Get my things ready. Get your things ready. We're leaving. Get all the clothes. Just pack it in. Hurry, just squeeze it in, I said. As master wishes. Conseil packed all of our shirts and suits, but he could not fit the fossils I brought from my museum. We left the fossils behind, and then we took a car and came onto Bowery Street, turned on Katrine Street, and stopped at Pier 34. It was the 34th dock that had the Abraham Lincoln waiting for us. All right, so this is where we went ahead and started with our maps. So remember, we had taped our maps together. If you haven't done that yet, you want to go ahead and get them from the back of your packet. And there's an example of what the map should look like on the page before the large maps. I don't have a copy of it here. No, it's up here. So page 21 has a small picture of the completed map, and it has the instructions to cut and tape the following pages. Now, the pages overlap a little bit, so you can match them up like a puzzle, and I cut the edges off of this first piece and this third piece, or you could cut the edges off of the center piece and then match them up. So it's doesn't have to be perfect, but but you can kind of see where they overlapped a smidgen, and then I taped them with clear tape so that I could still see the map. So now we've got a nice big map. Trying to trace the route on a small map would have been pretty challenging. New York, New York is interesting because it's the city and the state. They're both named New York. And so when somebody says, I'm going to New York, you can ask the city or the state. And New York, New York is where Professor Aronnax is. And it's right here on the map. It's right off of the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, and it's just below and to the right of these, which are the Great Lakes. These are the Great Lakes. So we're starting at New York, New York. I went ahead and put a little dot there and labeled it New York, New York. An officer stood to greet us on the boardwalk. The Abraham Lincoln had a blackish blue color from all the dirt. It's where the ocean's waves could not reach it. Conseil and I were filled with excitement, knowing we would soon be aboard a mighty battleship. Professor Pierre Aronnax? The officer asked me. Yes, the only one, I said. I asked him if he was Commander Farragut. He was. He kindly walked us on to the Abraham Lincoln, then to my personal cabin. That's his room, his cabin. Is the pressure high? And when I say room, I mean like where he's going to be sleeping. Is the pressure high? Commander yelled to his crewmen. Yes, it's very high, the crewman, who was covered in soot, yelled back to Commander Farragut. Go ahead then. The engine blew steam from every pipe, and the steam was blacker than night. Then the propeller sent the Abraham Lincoln out into the water. It was 8 o'clock in the evening, and we ran full steam ahead into the Atlantic Ocean. So you can see why it would start off in the Atlantic Ocean, because this is right off of the Atlantic Ocean. This ocean here is the Atlantic, and it's to the east, to the right of our country, if we were looking at, well, a map. And this is the United States of America. It's kind of hard to see these fine lines. Up here is Canada. Down here is Mexico. There is a fine line that you can see that divides these countries within North America, which is our continent. Up here is Alaska. I don't think it's really that big. This map is stretched out because the Earth is really a globe, a sphere, a giant ball. And so when you try to stretch it onto a rectangular map, things get distorted. So, like, I think Alaska is not that big. I think that the stuff up here is not that small. And also, Antarctica down here is ginormous. I don't think it's really that big if we were looking at it compared to the other continents. Alrighty, so we're in the Atlantic Ocean, and I drew a line so that we can see the direction that we're going, the and kind of the order that we're going in. In fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and put an arrow there. Chapter 4, Ned Land. The Abraham Lincoln was ready to fight. Remember, it was a battleship. It had hand harpoons, and harpoon is a word that you might want to put down on your page of new words or vocabulary words. Page 15 in your packet, you can write the word here and then the definition to the right of it. You'll want to look up a more formal definition, but when I think of harpoon, I think of like kind of like a gun that shoots, instead of shooting bullets, it shoots a metal arrow and then has a string attached to it so that and the arrow isn't like a normal arrow. It's got like hooks so that when it goes into the animal, then it would pull it back when the string is pulled, kind of like a fishing rod. So it had harpoons, sharp arrows, and duck guns with exploding bullets on board. Ugh. And it had cannons that could fire miles out to sea. As for the crewmen, they wanted to harpoon the monster and to sell the meat. I learned that Ned Land, an old friend, was on board. He was very tall and about 40 years old. He was a good seaman, and he was strong, almost too strong. He was worth the whole crew all by himself, just with his throwing arm. I can only say that he was like a telescope ready to fire a harpoon at any moment. On the evening of June 25th, Ned Land and I had an interesting conversation. Ned, I asked him, how can you still not believe it? He slapped his forehead and closed his eyes, and then he finally said, just maybe, Aronnax. But Ned, you're the best whale hunter I know, I said. Any talk of monsters living at sea is nothing more than a fairy tale. I've seen many whales, but not a single one can cut through an entire ship. Well, I believe the ship stories, I went on. It must live deep in the ocean. Why do you say that? Ned Land wondered. Because it takes a lot of strength to live there. The pressure is so high it could crush anything. As you go deeper into the ocean, the pressure gets more and more intense. So, with the depth of the ocean that this thing is going into, it must be extremely strong to be able to withstand that kind of pressure. So, Aronnax is saying the pressure could crush anything. Bosh, he claimed. That means like nonsense. It's true. If the monster lived 10 meters underwater, it would feel 10 times the pressure than the surface. At 100 meters, it would feel 100 times the pressure. And at 1,000 meters, it would feel 1,000 times the pressure, I said. Fire and brimstone. He's like, that's ridiculous, Ned Land put it. Ned Land never believed in anything until he saw it with his own two eyes. He was also like a knight on the quest to get rid of a dragon, but instead of a dragon, it was a giant narwhal. Either he would slay the giant narwhal or the giant narwhal would slay him. Chapter 5 At Random. The next day, the Abraham Lincoln reached the waters of the Pacific Ocean. So this is not how they would have gotten to the Pacific Ocean. They didn't say how they got to the Pacific Ocean, but I know that after being in the Atlantic Ocean, the next place they mention is the Pacific Ocean. And over here to the west of the United States is the Pacific Ocean. And in America, we often look at a map like this where America is on the left, North America is on the left, and I can always tell it because of this crab that I see in this picture, in this part of the earth. This is Florida. This is Mexico. This is the Gulf of Mexico. And so once I see that, I know that this is America and the United States of America, and the Great Lakes helps me too. So we're in the Pacific Ocean now. Open your eyes! Open your eyes! All the crewmen were shouting. We watched the surface of the water every minute of every day and every night. We passed the Hawaiian Islands, the area where the monster was last seen. It's hard to tell in your map, but this kind of blemish over here is a bunch of islands that make up Hawaii, which is a state in the United States of America. Alaska is too. These two are not connected to the United States of America, but they are part of it. So we go to Hawaii. I stared and stared some more until I almost went blind. Conseil stared at my side. Ned Land pretended to not even look at the water, but his vision was still better than ours. He stared at water for a living. Eventually, the ship steered off course, made sharp turns, and stopped at random to search for it. Then it searched every beach of Japan and America. So over here on the right side of our map, this right here is Japan. And again, if this were a globe, this ocean, the Pacific Ocean, would just be all connected. But because it's a map, it looks like it's not. So went to the shores, the beaches of Japan and America. So I'm picturing it kind of going across the ocean. Oh, okay. It took 1 year. Whew. They went for 1 year and we found nothing. We found no giant narwhal, no runaway reef, and no monsters. On the night of November 12th, 1867, huge clouds gathered near the moon. Conseil and I were on deck. Searching for this monster is a waste of time, my boy, I said. Exactly at the moment when Conseil opened his mouth to say a word or two, we heard a voice from behind. There it is! There it is! Chapter 6, At Full Steam. It was Ned Land shouting, and he had spotted a mass in the waters. The entire crew of harpooners, workers, and sailors rushed over to Ned Land. My heart was pounding. The water is difficult to see at night, but the sea was lit up by a long light in the shape of an oval and glowed on and off like a light switch. It appeared to be the monster's glow, and it was the brightest at the center. The light circled around the Abraham Lincoln at twice our speed. We were all frightened. It was so very fast. What is it, master? Conseil whispered. Maybe, I said, it's a giant electric eel. The monster shot out water into the air from its blowhole. It's a whale, I yelled. Then it suddenly sped away. Full steam toward the monster, Commander Farragut turned to his crewmen. The Abraham Lincoln was one of the most powerful American ships ever built. The Abraham Lincoln picked up speed. The ship's engine roared so loudly that it made me nervous. Conseil, I said, we might blow ourselves up if this ship keeps this speed. If that's what Master wishes, which was not what Aronnax was saying he wanted. It's just what he was saying to Conseil might happen. Suddenly, the giant narwhal stopped in its underwater tracks. It glowed brighter and brighter. Bah! Commander Farragut said. Load the cannons. Maybe it's tired, I thought. I saw Ned Land draw back his arm and hurl a dangerously sharp harpoon with all of his might. The harpoon made a clunk, then bounced off the giant narwhal's back. Its glow quickly disappeared. Then two powerful water streams shot out of the giant narwhal again and onto the deck of the Abraham Lincoln. 5 sailors fell over the rails, and I was hurled into the sea. Chapter 7, An Unknown Whale. I'm a good swimmer. With 2 kicks, I came back up to the surface. I knew how to stay calm in the water. Help! I shouted, swimming toward the Abraham Lincoln. My clothes were heavier than lead. You know, when clothes get wet, they're really heavy. The Abraham Lincoln was leaving. Its lights disappeared. I thought I was done for. Help! I shouted once more. My mouth was filled with water, and I was slowly sinking. But then, out of nowhere, a set of hands pulled me up to the surface. If Master leans on my shoulder, Master will swim easy. You, I said, you. Myself. You were thrown overboard? Not at all. I followed you, Master. The boy thought following me into the sea was only natural. I couldn't believe it. So we know just from the way they're talking to one another that this is Conseil, his servant. We tried to keep each other afloat as long as possible until a new boat or ship came by. It was impossible and exhausting. We slowly started sinking together now. Suddenly, something banged against us. It felt like a small island underneath our feet and kept us afloat. Then we heard a familiar voice and saw a shape walking toward us in the moonlight. Ned, you were thrown overboard? In person and still after the giant narwhal, he said. I was thrown into the sea, but I was luckier than you and landed on this floating island. A floating island? I wondered. You're standing on the giant narwhal, but the giant narwhal isn't a narwhal or a floating island, Ned Land said. What do you mean? My harpoon couldn't cut through it. It's made of steel. We stomped our feet and heard an empty bang underneath. It was true. The giant narwhal was made of metal. We were standing on a machine built by human hands and one which could travel underwater. It was hard to believe, but we were on it. What would we find inside? What kind of strangers would live in it? Suddenly, a steel hatch flipped open. Oh, and this was another word I thought we might want to look up. Hatch, Hatch. I did not look this up, but when I think of a hatch, I think of like a door, but it doesn't really have a knob. I picture it usually opening up and closing down, and it doesn't have a knob on it or a lock. Well, it might have a lock, but anyway, that's what I picture a hatch being. Then 8 gigantic men came out of the hatch. Their faces were like masks, and they dragged us down into the unknown machine. They captured us at lightning speed, and they were holding knives and daggers. Chapter 8: Moving Inside the Moving Thing. The walls inside of this unusual thing were lit by an electric glow. It was the same glow we had seen observing from the Abraham Lincoln. The men dragged us into a small prison holding room. Brimstone! Ned Land cried. A man entered who had thick black hair, a long mustache, bright eyes, powerful muscles, and wide shoulders. The man's eyes were strangely spaced. They were too far apart. He was the commander. Master, you should tell our story, Conseil said. Conseil had a good idea, so I explained everything, starting with our names. Professor Pierre Aronnax, Conseil, and Ned Land. Then I explained our jobs and how we arrived at sea. The man could not understand a single word, and his stares were empty and blank. Then Ned Land started our story all over again. He used wilder hand gestures and a louder voice. Nothing worked. Then Conseil retold it in German, French, and Latin. These are bad men, Ned Land yelled. Quiet, I said. Don't get angry. They might hurt us. That's the problem of not knowing every language, Master, Conseil said. A servant entered with food and clothing. He laid some jackets and sailor pants down onto the floor. They were crafted from a strange fabric that might have come from the inside of seashells. After we changed into our new clothing, we sat down at the small wooden table. The servant had brought colorful fish and vegetables. I noticed there was something carved in the wood. Mobilis in mobili. It was Latin, and it means moving inside the moving thing. That was the name of this chapter. As we're reading, you want to think how realistic some of this story is. A lot of it makes sense. Where we've been in the ocean, we've been on a battleship, so that could be true. Fabric made from the inside of seashells doesn't seem possible. It says it might have come from the inside of seashells. Be thinking about what seems reasonable and what seems unreasonable. If a story is true, it's called nonfiction. And if it's not true, it's called fiction. So fiction you can think of means false. Nonfiction, not false, is true. So that would have really happened. Chapter 9: The Tantrums of Ned Land. We have to escape, Ned Land said. There is nothing we can do, I said. You're wrong, Ned Land shouted. We can break out of here. Keep your voice down, I said. It's impossible. We're underwater. It's not, Professor, Ned Land went on. All we have to do is fix things around here. We can kick the guards, servants, and the captain off and into the sea, Conseil whispered. We waited for hours on end for an opportunity. Ned Land was growing angrier the longer we were imprisoned. He was like a beast, pacing back and forth. He was hungry, then started growling and shouting. That's when the servant walked in, and Ned Land dashed to him. He jumped onto him and threw him down. He was holding him by the throat. Conseil was already trying to loosen the powerful grip of Ned Land's hand. Calm down, Mr. Land. And you, the professor, listen to me. Chapter 10. The Man of the Waters. The commander had spoken, and in our native language. So when the guy came in earlier and acted like he didn't know what they were saying, it was actually the commander, and he did know what they were saying. Gentlemen, the commander said, I speak French, German, Latin, and I could easily have replied, now release my servant. The commander's voice was strong and clear. Ned Land let the servant go. You are my enemies, Professor Aronnax, Mr. Land, and Conseil, he said. You have been chasing me throughout the sea in your battleship. We don't have to chase you now that we know this thing isn't a giant narwhal, I said. I've cut ties with every land and every country. I am a man of the waters. Your country shall chase me no matter what. After we calmed ourselves, Captain Nemo offered an unusual proposal. So that's when we find out what the commander's name is. His name is Captain Nemo. I will allow all of you to be free aboard my ship, he went on. You can walk, eat, and observe as you wish, but you can never leave now that you've discovered my secret. By thunder, Ned shouted. One question, sir, I wondered. What do we call you? Simply Captain Nemo, and you are my prisoners aboard the Nautilus. So the Nautilus is the name of this submarine. We were all frightened by our new situation, but we couldn't do anything to change it. His crewmen were too strong to fight, and it was impossible to swim across the ocean. Our only choice was to accept Captain Nemo's offer. Chapter 11. The Nautilus. Captain Nemo gave me a private tour around the Nautilus. I wanted to know every marvel a ship like the Nautilus hid. I followed him to an enormous library lit by electric light. It was like a palace. There were at least 7,000 books on the shelves in every language. There were some about science, outer space, and history, and were all treasures to my eyes. Then we walked over to the lounge, which housed a museum. Paintings of the seas and sculptures of seashells were all over the place. They were worth millions of francs. I was in a state of joy because not even a museum in Europe owned such a collection from the sea. I thanked him, then said, You must love the sea. Yes, it's my home, he kindly told me. Yes, it's my home. He kindly told me to take a seat. Chapter 12. Everything Through Electricity. I sat as Captain Nemo spread his arms across a wall of all the gauges, instruments, and levers attached to it. They were tools to measure temperature, location, and the pressure inside of the ship. I've never seen a few of these instruments before, Captain, I said. Yes, those are the ones that control a powerful force on the Nautilus, he warned me. Electricity. But, sir, how can this ship have so much of it? I wondered. The sea has all sorts of metals that help the Nautilus generate enormous amounts of electricity. But that's not all, Professor. If you would please follow me, he added. So this was 1867. Electricity, gosh, I don't know when electricity was invented, but it was pretty new then. And I know that nobody had it underwater at that point. I am not sure that this is true, that the sea has all sorts of metals that help the Nautilus generate enormous amounts of electricity. I am doubting that. I'm skeptical of it. Captain Nemo then led me to the Nautilus's stern. He explained how he was able to send a telegram to the Nautilus through a wire which connected him to control the ship. It was able to follow him anywhere he went. It was a miraculous machine filled with secrets to the brim. Chapter 13. Some Figures. I found out everything about the Nautilus. Its cylinder and cigar shape gave it a quick speed and its ability to turn. It collected water in the walls, which reinforced the steel plates as it submerged down to astonishing depths. To rise back to the surface, it released the water. In fact, the walls had the resistance of stone blocks. So I read that Jules Verne, the guy who wrote the original version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, had actually seen some like new drawings of a new machine called a submarine. So he did say this correctly according to what actually happens, that the submarine collects waters in the walls, it reinforces the steel plates, it reinforces the walls as the submarine goes deeper into the ocean. And so that's how it can withstand the pressure at those deep depths. The Nautilus had only one problem. It could only store 2 days worth of air for the entire crew. Captain Nemo loved the Nautilus as if it were his own flesh and blood. To my delicate surprise, Captain Nemo was the sole engineer, the builder, and the captain. It had cost 2 million francs to build. Back then, the the dollar in America, France had francs. He was an infinitely rich man and could pay off the French national debt. All I could say to Captain Nemo was, "Bravo, Captain." Like, good job, Captain. Chapter 14, The Black Current. If 1 league is 3 miles across the sea, the amount of water the planet holds can make a sphere of 60 leagues across. So I think I said before that I had thought that the title meant that they were going 20 leagues deep into the sea, but it's actually 20 leagues around the world just under the sea. So 1 league is 3 miles. So if a boat travels 3 miles on the ocean, it's traveled a league. We made our way. Oh no, Captain Nemo was the first commander in the world to explore its greatest depths, to explore all the oceans. We made our way through the central hallway, which led to a set of metal steps. I passed through the hatch and arrived at the top of the Nautilus. I glanced over the ocean. The metal on the outside of the Nautilus were like scales of a reptile. So if we're thinking about it, he came up, there's a hatch here that we can't see, either here or here. And then you can come up here onto this platform and stand there behind these railings. Sorry, there's a glare. At that railing and look out. Um, yeah, so we can't see the hatch, but it's in there. The sea was magnificent and the sky was clear. There was no land, island, or Abraham Lincoln, only the vast blue horizon. Professor, whenever you're ready, Captain Nemo said below. I took one last look at the sea, then closed the hatch. We hereby begin our voyage of exploration underwater, Captain Nemo said. And now here are the charts for our course. They use a chart, like a map, to figure out where they're going to be traveling. The lounge is at your disposal, Professor. I must take my leave. I still wondered what kind of character Captain Nemo was. Conseil mentioned that he is one of those Galileo types of men, a pioneer of science which the world has not accepted yet. I couldn't say. One day it would do us some good to find out. I looked over the old embrowned charts. Our next destination was a Japanese river called the Black Current. Where are we heading? Ned Land asked. My friends, I said to them, we are 50 meters below sea level and safe aboard the Nautilus. If Master says it, then it must be, Conseil said. It was a treacherous waterway to be on, so I decided to not mention that to my friends. I haven't seen anyone around lately. Could they be electric too? How many men are on board? 10, 20, or 100? Ned Land said nervously. Ned, you must get rid of your notion to take over the ship. It's impossible. Besides, we are inside one of the greatest inventions of the world, I said. It's the beginning of the end, he said. The lounge was separated from the sea by 2 layers of thick glass and thin metal sheets. We stared into the large windows. The water was like liquid light. All sorts of sea creatures swam across as if the Nautilus was invisible. Bright ones, yellow and gold ones, and we saw almost every color we could think of. Some swam too fast and others gently. We saw Japanese eels and salamanders that were 6 feet long and had sharp little eyes. Chapter 15, An Invitation in Writing. On November 16th, I found a note in my room. It was written with Old English style. The note read, Professor Aronnax, passenger on the Nautilus, November 16th, 1867. Captain Nemo invites Professor Aronnax on the hunting trip, which will take place tomorrow on the Crespo Island forests. Captain Nemo hopes nothing will delay the professor from attending. From Captain Nemo, commander of the Nautilus. I brought the note to my friends. A hunting trip, Ned Land shouted. And he has an island? Conseil added. So this means the commander goes ashore, Ned Land said. Sweet, sweet land, we're saved. If Captain Nemo does go ashore, I said, then he'll no doubt choose an empty far-off island. We'll be deserted if we make a plan to escape. The next morning I entered the lounge and talked to Captain Nemo about something which had bothered me. Captain, why is it that you cut ties from every country and own forests on an island? These forests are mine, Professor, he replied. They don't hold lions, tigers, deer, or elephants. These forests are actually underwater forests. Underwater forests? Yes. We shall be hunting in these underwater forests? I wondered. With rifles in hand? Yes, with rifles, he said. I looked at him as if his mind was not in place. He must be crazed with an illness or disease, I thought. Professor, you must not make snap judgments. You might think I was insane talking about underwater forests, he said, but listen to me. We are going to hunt at the bottom of the sea. He went on, we have special suits that can withstand the pressure, but also collect air and light the darkness by turning carbon dioxide into light. And the rifles, they aren't gunpowder? They are air rifles, Captain Nemo said, and shoot little glass capsules. I returned to Conseil and Ned Land. Prepare yourselves, my companions. We are going hunting on the bottom of the sea. Chapter 16, Strolling the Plains. We found ourselves in a large room near the very bottom of the Nautilus. Hanging on the walls were dozens of diving suits and oddly shaped rifles, tanks of oxygen, and everything for a stroll underwater. The suits had large round helmets made of copper and tubing. The material felt flimsy and loose. What sort of material were they, and would they protect us from the pressure? Will you risk it? Ned Land asked Conseil. Where master goes, I go, Conseil replied. That's right, my boy, I said, and threw a helmet to both Conseil and Ned Land. The captain and one of his crewmen also put on a suit. The crewman was gigantic and looked as if he had the strength of Hercules. The room slowly filled with seawater. It was dark, but the lights on our helmets lit the way. We stood frightened for a moment, not knowing what adventure waits at the bottom of the sea. A powerful sun ray hit the seafloor. It lit objects 100 meters away. We were 30 meters deep. Vast plains of sand seemed endless, like liquid curtains. I noticed sparkling rocks and green sea plants, and prickly coral covering the ocean floor. Some were pink and black, and others reflected light. The sand had trails and paths carved out by the water's currents and breezes. Conseil looked at me, and we stopped at the beautiful sight. We were afraid to walk and crush the thousands of life living underneath our feet. Comb shells, hammer shells, coquina shells, which jump, top shell snails, red helmet shells, angel wing conchs, and baby crabs. There were schools of milky white fish and octopi that let their tentacles float over our heads. Octopi is more than one octopus. Jellyfish appeared as if they were in a slow vibration through. We saw glowing creatures and creatures that blended in. As we walked, the water deepened and the sunlight from above slowly faded. We were 100 meters below the surface now. What were we hunting for, if not the sea creatures and schools of nearby fish? I wondered. So that's where we left. It's kind of a cliffhanger. What were they hunting for? And that's a question you might ask yourself before we read the next part of the book. What could they possibly be hunting for with these rifles with glass pellets? They shoot with pressure from air, and we can only imagine what they might be looking for under the water. So when we meet again, we'll pick up there and make sure you've got your maps with us and your page that has the new words on it. You can add words as you hear them, that you'd like to see what they are because they don't really make sense to you, or maybe they do make sense, but only because of context and the way it sounds in the book. And then you can make a definition from it. And we'll also be using the other pages from our packet when we meet next. So I am looking forward to seeing you, and thank you for listening.